I am the Audiophiliac, and I'm here with David in his home in Brooklyn. And I've known David decades. And you are looking around here. You're an audiophile. You got a lot of audio stuff. How did this happen? When did you start? Let's put it that way.
I was in a store in Borough Park, Brooklyn, and someone gave me issue 10 of the Audiophile Voice. I was strictly a receiver, junkie turntable kid at the time, and it just fascinated me. And I started hunting down the magazine. And then, like most of us who weren't into high-end audio at the time, Anthony Cordesman wrote about amber electronics. Amps and preamps, and it was something that was affordable to people who didn't understand why something should cost thousands. It was only hundreds, and that's how me and some of my friends started. And then I had written a letter to the Absolute Sound about music, and they referred me to go speak to Sid Marks, who at the time was the writer for the reviews of all the living stereo recordings and Mercury recordings.
For the Absolute Sound.
Yes, and then he and I became friends, and he started me on the hunt for those records, which consumed me for years.
So the music came first.
Yes, the music had always come first. My first record at 13 was Mahler's Eighth Symphony,
Whoa.
which I had heard on a rehearsal recording of the Philadelphia Orchestra on NYC radio.
Good start.
Yeah, definitely.
So, what was your turntable journey since it was that long?
My turntable derby was a mechanical Garrard, and it was really pretty much that until I, with Sid, met Harry Weisfeld, who at the time was making isolation bases.
Right, before he made turntables.
Right, turntables. Then he came out with the 19, and Sid and I both bought that, and that started me on this road spiraled downward into expensive stuff.
So you started with a VPI as your first serious turntable,
and I've always
had still have a VPI.
I still have a VPI. I'm up to an Avenger reference.
So how many have you owned?
Maybe five since the early 1960s.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, not since the 60s. No.
Yeah, 60s. Yeah.
Harry didn't.
I was into music. We're not audio.
Okay. I meant the turntable thing. Okay. So that's pretty interesting. Okay, so let's go through it. So then your preamps along the way?
My preamps, it was a Melos preamp in the beginning.
Wow.
And then a Conrad Johnson Premier 2, then a Premier 3. And then my current one is a GAT preamp.
GAT? What's
GAT,
that?
Conrad Johnson GAT.
Oh, okay. So you're very loyal.
I'm very loyal. I'm very careful how I spend. I'm sad to say most of it is used because being a retired social worker, I never had the bucks to start out at the high prices. So I buy carefully over the years. But I'm not generally considered a consumer in the trade.
Okay. That's okay. You're still in. And then these speakers, I got to back up because the speakers are so tall. Got to back up and not trip. So what are these things?
Okay, Mark Pizzilli was the designer behind the scenes for Melos Electronics. And for himself, he built these speakers.
And there's subwoofers that are part of that.
The subwoofers are behind. These speakers used to be 3 feet taller than they are.
Okay.
The drivers are all Japanese drivers. There are currently 94 drivers in this system. 25 mid-range drivers aside. 22 ribbon tweeters aside, and each sub has 2 18-inch woofers. And when they went into...
So is the sub and the speaker driven off of one channel, or
no,
the sub is a separate?
Sub has separate 750-watt amp and its own crossover. Sadly, the speakers are wildly inefficient. They're 81 dB.
Wow.
So they basically don't work unless you have a super amount of power.
Okay.
Which was their downfall when they tried to go into production. Because they could only work with amps of superhuman power and cost.
Right.
So they changed from using the planar magnetic drivers and the ribbon tweeters into regular cone speakers. And then they became what is known as the pipe dreams, which is something that I actually named them because the pipe dream is something that you always want but can never attain. And it just seemed like the perfect name for these speakers.
Okay. Oh, and the amp. What is that?
The amp is a Conrad Johnson Premier 350.
And next to it?
Next to it is a crossover for the subs.
Oh, okay, okay.
And I have an EAR Yoshino CD player. Almost everything in the system, with the exception of the amp, is tube-based. Everything is tube output stages. I like the warmth of tubes.
So the other reason we're doing this video, though, is you are the president, right?
Well, I sort of run the Audiophile Society.
But
we don't have an elected president. No, I'm the recording secretary.
Okay.
I basically do this because one of the issues with the Audiophile Society is the preponderance of members live in New York City, but only 3 of us have a home that's big enough to entertain a meeting.
Okay.
Most people live in apartments, so we could have 25, 35, 40
Right.
people come to a meeting.
Right.
So I hold meetings here sometimes in the winter because of proximity to public transportation. Another member in Forest Hills has a meeting, and then we generally have meetings either also in Queens or out in New Jersey between manufacturers, retailers, and other members, as opposed to all the other clubs like the Jersey Club and the Connecticut Club is made up almost exclusively of homeowners. So, and everyone has cars.
Right.
So they drive all over the place. They have meetings all over the place.
Right.
We're a bit more limited because of being in New York City.
So how do people, if they don't know about the society, how do they you don't have a web page, right?
We do not have a web page. We're listed in Stereophile's Guide to Clubs. I think we were listed somewhere else once. We have an excellent writer, Mark Block, who does our meeting notices. And we have a discussion group also in one of the sites. I am totally not computer savvy.
Okay, but Mark can tell me where I can, in other words, how can people find you?
Oh yeah, well again, we're listed in Stereophile's Guide to Clubs, and that's where we do get most of our referrals. We also get referrals from other members, and sometimes from retailers who have a customer who's interested in going a little deeper into a group, and they refer to us.
But the meetings are basically monthly.
The meetings are monthly with the exception of July because I need a break.
Okay, that's fair. And the meetings are basically a manufacturer comes, although I know that's less and less, but there's usually a theme to each meeting.
Yes, but historically that's been, I think, one of the biggest changes in Audio Society meetings. In the old days, we had no problems getting manufacturers.
Right.
People would come, they'd bring equipment, they'd fly in from all over the place. And it wasn't uncommon in the height of the 80s and early 90s when the clubs were really hot, that a manufacturer would end up selling his demo product to someone at a meeting.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah,
wow.
but that really doesn't happen much anymore, and it's become much more expensive for manufacturers to travel. They know that most of the club members are not consumers, and they're more reluctant to come and spend all the money and time doing a demonstration for non-consumers.
Right.
On the other side, every time we do get some products that are really good, we're more than happy to recommend dealers. We're more than happy to recommend the products to people who sometimes call up the membership just on a casual basis to try to find out where they should shop or what should they consider. Sure. Right, and that's worked out pretty well. The club has been in existence since the late 70s.
Yeah, but the main reason that people should be interested, if they're local enough to get here, is you're meeting your fellow audiophiles. I mean, most people who are audiophiles, unless they have friends, they don't know that many people. Right?
That's true, but
they feel disconnected. Here's like a community.
Yes, it is a community. It tends to be, sadly, an older community than it used to be. The newer members in most of the societies have either limited budgets, limited physical room to set up a stereo, and some don't even have stereos. They're into headphones and headphone amps, which is fine. Right. But it's really a space limitation. My room is 17 wide by 35 long by 9.5 feet tall. It helps to have a room like that.
It definitely does. Okay, I think we think we're good. We could talk a little bit about your music, because you have a lot. And I'm just going to scan around as you're telling us. But there's some CDs over here. But you're mostly into classical music, right?
I'm mostly into classical music, and I'm pretty much simply a label collector because I like music recorded in a very natural way. So I have literally all the Mercurys, all the EMIs. It's taken years, but it's true. I'm a big collector of the Audiophile label from Wisconsin, which is a fabulous amount of recorded music, very unusual, very unknown, and amazingly recorded. I probably have, if I have 50 popular records in the last 30 years, it's a miracle. I'm not that interested in music that every 3 minutes changes to another mood and another sound.
I understand. Well, I think that's what people do, is they focus on their favorite genres, whether it's rock or pop or classical or jazz or whatever, and they dabble in other things, but they once you're past a certain age, you focus on the stuff you like. That's cool.
Well, one of the things that we also discuss sometimes at meetings, since again that you're here as the audiophiliac and he's sometimes reviewer of equipment, is how some of us choose to read a review or listen to music. Right. And my thing is, I read a review in a very specific way. The first thing I look at is what equipment is in the reviewer's reference system. Is it analog? Is it digital? Is it both? Okay. Then I tend to scan the review to see if he even mentions any music in particular, regardless of genre, whether it's classical, pop, jazz, rap. I don't care what it is as long as it's listed, to give me some idea of what the musical tastes are of this person. Okay. Then I look at the cost of the equipment. And sadly, lately, when it gets past a certain high figure, I sadly tend not even to read the review because it's out of this world and it's irrelevant to, I think, most audiophiles. It may be relevant to bankers and money moguls, but it's not relevant to real music lovers.
I hear you.
And then I'll read the review. But I've seen too many reviews where not a single piece of music of any kind is referenced. So I don't understand what the reviewer is really talking about. I don't know what he thinks about, what he feels when he listens to music.
I don't know. I think reviewers of audio or restaurants or movies or wine, I tend to go with reviewers that I have a track record with, that we're on the same wavelength, that sort of thing. That's how I would read a review. I mean, if it's a review by, to me, an unknown reviewer, and he or she comes to some conclusion, it's meaningless because I don't know where they're coming from.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because most of the guys who certainly started out with the Absolute Sound and Stereophile clearly have more faith in some of the long-term, still-around reviewers. I will read anything that Anthony Cordersman reviews. I don't care what it's about, because I really have faith in his ability to talk about stuff. He's a very serious guy. But your point is well taken. A lot of the internet reviewers, I have no idea who they are. I read them and they don't seem to have any history in either reviewing or listening to music. They're very generalized. They're too flowery. Everything is great. In the old days, Harry Piercer would occasionally put a product down, but that just never happens anymore.
Yeah, I think we got to cut it short.
Okay.
Anyway, thanks so much, David. My name is Steve Guttenberg. This is the Audiophiliac Daily Show. Please come back often, check it out, and see you soon. Bye-bye.